We're going to start, as you know, and as always, you have 12 minutes for your presentation. And after that, we'll have the time for a few questions, right? So we're gonna follow the schedule, and Edda Starck and Raúl Matta are the first speakers with food, conviviality, and migrants, sustainable livelihoods in Germany. So, Edda, the floor is yours. Your 12 minutes to start right now.
Okay, Raúl will come in a moment with the presentation, but with the PowerPoint, but I'll just start the presentation now.
Okay.
In 2015, the number of people fleeing war, persecution, and lack of economic perspectives in the Middle East and West Africa increased substantially. Many experienced dangerous and traumatic journeys to reach Europe. Once there, they faced the challenge of inclusion and integration into society, from jobs, housing, and education to societal participation. Against nationalisms that demand the closing of frontiers and preach the rejection of the other, citizens in several countries get organized around projects to support the newcomers. Food occupies a prominent place in many of these initiatives, which range from refugee food festivals, cooking workshops, community gardens, food aid, shared meals, and ethnic food events. Both necessary subsistence and a communicative system, food is framed by civil society organizations as a means to enable social integration. Food is seen as capable of bringing together people from different cultures and backgrounds. In the context of the study, food encompasses the activities of production, cooking, retail, catering, and education aimed at concurring to social integration, be they non-commercial or job-related or entrepreneurial. We argue accordingly that food accomplishes a sustainable role for migrants' presence and futures in host societies. We see sustainability as a tripartite phenomenon with social, economic, and environmental dimensions, where what is at stake is the capacity to continue a desired condition or process, to preserve a certain status, or to provide with the necessities of life. To illustrate the interlocking of the social, economic, and environmental dimensions, we could think on the conflicts between environmental advocates and rural people who live by natural resource production. These conflicts are not just about ecology versus economics, they are about sustaining a new way of life. The study focuses on two Berlin-based initiatives towards refugees and migrants, where food and cooking are pivotal for the creation of contexts that foster exchange, innovation, and creativity with locals. The initiatives we present here are carried out by two organizations called Refueat and Über den Tellerrand, meaning outside the box in German. Their overall aim is to contribute to the integration and sustainable livelihoods of newcomers, that is, stable and safe lives for migrants in Berlin. We consider both initiatives as grounded on the concept of conviviality. Based on the Latin roots for with and living, the term conviviality has been associated with sociable, friendly, and festive traits, and broadly conceptualized as the capacity of living together. Conviviality addresses the challenges of intercultural relations and the consequences this has for social relations of living together. Conviviality conveys a deeper concern with the human condition and how we think about human modes of togetherness. But more specifically, the initiatives addressed here are examples of what the Turkish anthropologist Deniz Duru termed convivial solidarity. By convivial solidarity, she refers to the collective work performed by civil society actors in order to fight for a common aim and to find solutions for common concern in non-communitarian and non-hierarchical ways. Convivial solidarity includes face-to-face social integration, a sense of common humanity emphasized by those who engage with it, and a normative drive towards fighting for equal rights. While conviviality refers to living together on a daily basis, convivial solidarity inspires the people involved in possible future convivial living, especially in situations of tension or crisis. In the following, we will see how Refueat and Über den Tellerrand put into practice convivial solidarity. Refugeed is a food business operating in Berlin. It was formed by a second-generation German-Syrian designer and a retired German business consultant. Together, they wanted to offer low-threshold employment opportunities to recent arrivals. Hence, they decided to use self-customized kitchen bicycles to sell Syrian food all over the city, employing solely Syrian refugees. Their dishes on their menu are common Syrian street food, such as falafel and halloumi sandwiches. The much attention is given to details taken from traditional family recipes, as for instance, adding important amounts of pomegranate and lemon. Selling street food via bicycles means that their staff do not require German driver licenses, professional qualifications, or advanced German language proficiency. Using bike trailers, Refugeed sets up portable grill stands at public events and private occasions. In 2019, Refugeed additionally opened an eatery, and more recently, they have developed a home delivery service. Refugeed works to support sustainability in ecological, economic, and social manners. Environmentally, they promote resourcefulness by preferring both organic and recyclable materials, as well as by relying on muscle power rather than fossil fuels to move through the city. Economically, they offer stable and fair paid employment to members of a community which commonly experiences much economic precarity. By providing financial security, Refugeed gives their staff the opportunity to be independent from the unstable support infrastructure provided by the government. Not being dependent on state benefits means that their staff are less affected by institutional pressures to assimilate, but are instead given the opportunity to build a life in Germany on their own terms. Besides offering employment to migrants, it is particularly important to Refugeed to bring their workers in contact with the wider local community, as well as to bring Syrian culture closer to Berlin. For this reason, they have designed their business in a way that would attract a predominantly German clientele, to which they can present a digestible amount of Syrian culture. From the aesthetics of the eatery and food bikes, fashionably painted in bright colors and bold patterns matching their street food theme, to the dishes themselves, Refugeed has specialized on bringing their staff into contact with local residents, as one of the business owners told us in an interview. Quote, "That's kind of the point of our business. That's also why we're positioned in a way to attract German customers, not Arabs." Accordingly, Refugeed headquarters are not located in a city area with strong migrant presence. Otherwise, the owner said, "This place would probably look very different, and there would be a completely different food on offer." Our menu is adapted in a way to appeal to the German community, because the point of all of this is to bring them into relation with Germans. Refugeed, by facilitating encounter both in the eatery and in the public spaces that the food bikes travel through, performs convivial solidarity to help refugees build and sustain a new life in Berlin. Importantly, this does not simply occur by introducing German and migrant communities to one another, but by heightening migrant visibility in public space. Moving the brightly colored food bikes through the city, the refugees working for Refugeed are able to claim space and visibility outside of the usual service actions. Their movement is not merely an economic strategy, but also a political comment. One of their slogans, "Street food aus der Heimat," street food from home, reimagines public space by questioning what home means, who the streets are for, and how they can be consumed or practiced. The food bikes are created as a strategy to defy the organization of public space, which makes business ownership and employment difficult for migrants. Simultaneously, migrants also learn how to navigate and inhabit public space in their new home. But this is not a unilateral process, as their movement also changes and rearranges Berlin's landscapes of food consumption and production. This way, migrants are not merely integrated into, but become part of the very making of the social fabric of Berlin's public spaces. The second organization, Über den Tellerrand, is an initiative established in 2013 in Berlin. Its mission is also to facilitate encounter between migrants and other local populations, but this time in a kitchen space. Here, migrants guide cooking groups and community events are hosted. So the association started in Berlin. Über den Tellerrand was very successful in creating satellite groups, which are spread all over Germany as well as internationally. These satellite groups are self-organized community projects where people come together to cook. Kitchen on the Run is the portable version of the project, which centers around a shipping container with an inbuilt kitchen. The container has traveled first through Europe, then through Germany during the summer months between 2016 and 19, organizing community cooking events on its way. Like Refugee Eats Food Bikes, Kitchen on the Run's portable kitchen is highly symbolic, especially so having been built into a shipping container. Its mobility calls to attention the immobilities of the migrants whose food expertise it works with. On its journey, the kitchen container became a knot point for different movements itself, transporting people, foods, and ideas, and facilitating the crossing of paths. In 2016, Kitchen on the Run traveled through Europe. The container visited the cities of Bari in Italy, Marseille in France, Duisburg in Germany, Deventer in the Netherlands, and Gothenburg in Sweden, and stayed in each occasion for 4 weeks. The journey followed a route from southern to northern Europe with a specific purpose, to indicate one of the most used routes by fleeing people and the European countries that at the time received a higher number of migrants. A Kitchen on the Run representative explained that the route was planned to symbolize and question that if goods can cross borders, then why can people not? The peripatetic shipping container further underlines the strong contrast between migrant immobilities and global economic supply chains. From 2017 to 2019, the kitchen container toured in 4 German locations each year, most often in small towns. The main goal in Germany was to create encounters between locals and people with migrant background and to foster community building. This occurred through the hosting of regular free cooking events in the container, at which migrants would be invited to teach a recipe from their country of origin to other attendees. In addition to migrants, the cooking classes were typically attended by the classical social engaged strata, as an organizer put it. These guests were often already familiar with the social justice issues around migrants' livelihoods in Germany and were commonly already invested in community activism. The composition of attendees underlines the political character of these events, which may be seen as a part of a strategy aiming to reimagine social relations through the medium of food, thereby aligning closely with the notion of convivial solidarity as a political performance. The cooking events allowed attendees to meet in a context that spotlights migrants' expertise and competences by platforming them as teachers. This enables a shift in narrative, moving away from the notion of local and migrant as host and hosted, and instead directing attention to thinking about how convivial solidarity may reshape communities and economies. One of the organizers explained to us in an interview that the idea is to break down the label a bit, and not to be either a refugee or non-refugee. By decentering the binary migrant local status of participants, the Kitchen Project affords the formation of relationships that resist social hierarchies of host and hosted. The events surrounding the Kitchen on the Run tour may therefore be considered acts of convivial solidarity that intend to bring people together and organize people together and create horizontal relationships. Initiatives like Refugee and Über den Tellerrand, which provide economic sustainability and opportunities for encounter and community building through convivial practices, enable migrants to live on their own terms, rather than in dependence on a generous host society. By reducing economic dependency on institutional support, they help migrants to regain autonomy over their lives, bringing together migrants and locals on equal terms and in a way that highlights migrants' expertise. They furthermore work to de-emphasize the notion of assimilation and instead give priority to co-creation. Thereby, their convivial solidarity may be seen as producing socio-economic sustainability with food as a medium. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Edda and Raúl. Hi, Raúl.
I'm sorry for being late on this.
Don't worry about that. Just
The country sometimes is very confusing.
we are
Sorry about that.
We are absolutely on time, so don't worry about that. It's time to questions and comments to the first communication this morning. So it's your time.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes,
If I don't understand correctly, you said two initiatives, one that is more like a business model type, and the other was more like initiative to bring together and the travel through Europe. Is that correct? Did I understand correctly? Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you repeat the question?
Yes, of course. I was saying that if I understood, as I understood it, you started two initiatives. One that it was giving more like a business model to migrant people have been able to have like a own business of the bicycles that have through Berlin, and the other one, the other initiative is like a food festival that travels through Europe. Is that correct, or did I understand it?
No. These are two associations that work and are based in Berlin. One, the first one is the one that works with the bikes, right? They sell, they do catering business using these bikes that travel across the city. They go to festivals, for instance, massive festivals. They have a stand. They also provide stands in enterprise meetings. You know, they do catering for many things using the bikes in Berlin. And the second one is also based in Berlin, but they have many activities across Germany. Like they travel, they do travel this this portable kitchen around Germany, but also around Europe. There were two main activities. So,
okay, and sorry.
Oh.
And I think Edda mentioned that you interview like the organizers, but I didn't well understood if you also interview the people participating, how they feel targeted by this or participating, sorry, not targeted, participating in these initiatives, the refugees. Did you talk to them, or it was only through the organizers that you get your insights for your study?
Yeah, do you want to reply?
Yeah, sorry, my connection was a bit bad earlier, but I think it's back now. Yeah, so it's an ongoing research project. So we're still going to organize more interviews. So far, we have only interviewed the organizers. Yeah, but it's definitely our goal to still do some interviews with participants as well. And it's with the kitchen container, it's a bit unsure at this point if they will be able to go on tour next year. But if they are, then we'll join them for part of the journey. Yeah, just conduct some more research on that way.
Yeah, let's say that these activities are about public space and gatherings, and now because of the COVID context, this is a bit more complicated. But yeah, we are really hopeful that the operation, the activity resume next year, and we can, that way we can do some work with these partners.
Yeah. Another question, sorry. I thought it was very interesting, that's why. I was wondering if any of these activities have some kind of a sponsoring from any government agency, or are they just civic societies initiatives, or how do they work?
In the case of Telegram, they look for funding. They look for funding, so they go, for instance, they approach a German Ministry of Migration, and also many other sources of funding that are available for the civic organizations to do work with migrants.
Okay.
And refugees, they also receive support for the start, for the beginning, because it is a social enterprise. But now they evolve more as a startup businesses.
Okay.
Yeah, it started with something more social, but now it's fully a business, I would say.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for a very interesting presentation.
Thank you for the questions.
Thank you, Julia. And any more questions?
Can I ask a question?
We have time. Go
Yes,
ahead.
yes, yes, of course. We can do it.
It's I don't know like who you're. I'm sorry, I don't know who you're talking to. Is me?
Yeah,
Mariana?
because you have Mariana, please.
Okay. It was very interesting presentation. Thank you so much. I was wondering because you said that you like one of the initiatives would travel around the country and also to other countries. If they said about differences depending on the part of the country they are, if they had more successful stories in, I don't know, because Berlin is a very global city. So I would expect it would be easier to have this kind of projects, but did they say about any bad experience as well in different parts of the country?
Ed, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there, but my connection's quite bad. Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, my connection's quite bad. So sorry, maybe you can take it. I can't really understand the question so well.
Okay, did you hear the question or a reply?
So it's about different experiences in different parts of the city, different parts of the country. Yeah. So we haven't really heard about any differences so far. Although it's a very interesting question, so maybe we should ask about that. But yeah, I mean, Über den Tellerrand has been incredibly successful at creating different satellite groups. So one of their goals is to create sustainable community projects that are self-organized by local groups, and they create little cooking projects. Basically, they help them find a kitchen, and where they then can like organize regular cooking events if they want to in between, where migrants and also other people are invited to cook together and organize their own projects. So this has been really successful for them, and they have dozens of groups all across Germany. So I suppose that this is perhaps an indicator that that has indeed been quite positively received. But they do also seek out places at this point where there's more friction between locals and migrants, or perhaps a lower acceptance rates of migrants into local communities. So this is something they're actively seeking out and attempting to change. Yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Raúl.
No, actually, they try to go to small places, not to medium cities or cities like Berlin, which are very global, and the encounters are more easy to perform, let's say. But they intentionally go to small places or let's say local with less migrant background. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So yeah, one more question, or
if we have time.
Yeah, but a very short one, Leah.
Very short. Very short. You used the word solidarity. Solidarity was a big concept in your presentation. I wonder if you could explain to me the difference between solidarity and hospitality when it comes to migrants, when it comes to locals relating to migrants.
That's a good question. That's a good question. Actually, we are using the term, our main concept is conviviality. And so this convivial solidarity is, let's say, is a different take on the use of conviviality. It's a more, let's say, has a more political tone. Hospitality, yeah, maybe we should think what, yeah. I think hospitality is more related to public policy, to state. Hospitality, that is more related to public policy, to the action of state and government. Hospitality, yeah. When we read about this, yeah, hospitality, yeah, in that terms, but politics of hospitality in Germany, convivial solidarity is more like grassroots.
Okay.
I would say that.
That makes sense. Good. Okay.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, perhaps also the term hospitality, of course, presupposes the notion of a host, and so solidarity has been used also in political circles, especially around migrant activism, in order to really shift this narrative away from the idea of a host and a hosted, so a recipient of basically some generous offering from a host, but instead to give space to this idea of co-creating something new. So I think in that sense, solidarity is a useful word that, as Raúl said, is particularly commonly used by grassroots organizations.
Thanks. Okay.
What a difficult question, Leah.
It was a difficult one.
Right?
Very important. Very important.
Really a difficult one. Okay, so thank you very much, Edda and Raúl. And now I just saw that Simona de Iulio is also here. Is that right, Simona?
Yes, yes. And I'm Cristina Romanelli. And I'm sorry, we had technical problems with Zoom for like 15 minutes. We were trying to connect. But...
Don't worry about that. You're already here. So it's your time, and you can start your communication on food sustainability on university campuses, social responsibility of the university in dealing with the food vulnerability of students. You know that you had your 12 minutes, and after that we'll have the time for a few questions, right?
Okay.
So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna share the
Raúl,
PowerPoint.
yeah, you're sharing your, okay, yeah, right, thank you.
Oh, wait. Okay.
You have to share your screen, perfect.
Is that okay? Or actually we can see you here.
You just to go to the first slide. Yes, yes, perfect.
Okay.
So,
okay.
So first of all, we would like to thank the organizers and the scientific committee for accepting our proposal. Our communication addresses the relationship between gastronomy and sustainability by focusing on the issues posed by food and public development policies. Our focus is particularly on the social responsibility of university with regard to food sustainability. The context to which we refer is the French one. In recent years, French health and nutrition plans and national food plans consider university students both as a vulnerable social group and a core target of actions promoting food sustainability. The key question that guides our intervention is which measures have been implemented by French universities to face students' food vulnerability and promote food sustainability. We will try to answer this question on the basis of the first results of the Livelihoods research project. This research has been ongoing since February 2020. It is a project involving researchers from different disciplines: communication sciences, sociology, and educational sciences. The aim of the project is to question the notion of food vulnerability and the ways in which students' food vulnerability is faced by different social actors at the University of Lille. For this research, we use different methods: participant on-site observations, document analysis, communication campaigns, posters, publications in social networks, and focus groups with students from the 5 different campuses, interviews with different actors involved, such as the Lille University Services Departments, the CRUS, that is the public body responsible for feeding, lodging, and giving scholarships and social aid to university students, and NGOs and student associations. Concerning our fields, the University of Lille is considered the first university in student population in France with near 70,000 students. And according to a research conducted by the University of Lille, 33% of students are in vulnerable situation in respect to economic, psychological, and also related to health, lodging, and isolation. So
I'm gonna introduce some of the first results we had. By the way, my name is Cristina Romanelli. It's not written there. I will start with the institutional definition of student vulnerability. According to the interviews that we have conducted with the personnel from CRUZ, which is this political body responsible for the restaurants, the university services departments also. So there are three main factors of student vulnerability: lodging, food, and student isolation. Other factors also mentioned were health, physical and psychological, and access to a computer and to the internet. So which students are considered vulnerable by our informants? Basically, those coming from a poor background, those who come from a conflicting family environment, in family breakdown, for instance, and international students from non-European countries, mainly Maghreb and Sub-Saharan Africa, who arrive in France without enough funds and who are far from their families. And one last point, what is food vulnerability? So there are two kinds of food vulnerability that were mentioned: the fact of not having enough money to eat regularly, and not having a varied nor balanced diet. Another important thing that we can highlight from the interviews is the social responsibility concerning the CRUZ and university. So according to its regional director, the CRUZ is a social operator that applies a public policy, since it offers a social meal for €3.30. He also mentions the political choice of making food at university restaurants instead of selling only industrial products. So to summarize, by selling meals made at university restaurants for accessible prices, the CRUZ avoids the two kinds of food vulnerability mentioned, which are food insecurity and the lack of a varied, balanced diet. The university has a different role. According to the Code of Education, university activities must be related to research and teaching. Nonetheless, many of our interviewees and students as well believe public universities also have a social responsibility. There is the idea of an inclusive university in which the university community must engage in civic action and in social responsibility towards the society, towards the territories, and also towards students. This engagement can be done through research or teaching, but there are many projects that go beyond that. One example, there are two solidary grocery stores created to sell mainly bulk food, so without plastic packaging, and hygiene products for lower prices to students in need. So since student associations are responsible for carrying on this project, it is considered as an educational one, and therefore it can be legally supported by the university. So I'll give you a few more examples of activities that are related to sustainability at the University of Lille. So the project Edible Campus, for instance, teaches urban agriculture, permaculture, organic food production, and biodiversity preservation. So students can cultivate orchids and vegetable gardens installed in the campuses and benefit from the gathering for free. Another example is the weekly distribution of organic food baskets at preferential rates. These are seasonal vegetables and also eggs produced in the garden near to one of the campuses. And there are also two projects that are still to come. The first one is a project of installing water fountains on each campus, giving all new students a stainless steel drinking bottle and creating a communication campaign to raise awareness on plastic pollution. By the way, water is the main product bought at vending machines installed at the university. There's also a carbon rationing program about to be launched with the goal of raising awareness on the choice of food and transportation models, for instance. And as the last example, but a very appealing one, One of our informants speaks of happy sobriety. It's a life concept created by the French ecologist Pierre Rabhi. So according to her, it means the possibility to live with little, but with dignity in a healthy, sustainable way. So students, they can get fruits and vegetables at university gardens, other products at the Solidarity grocery stores, have access to computers and books for free, go home with the bikes lended by the university, in a model that, according to her, is becoming the university's culture. So she says, those who come to the university know they will be in a sobriety model, then may it be a happy one. What is lacking today is consistency in everything we do, that is to say, to present it as a concept in itself. The cruise also has some sustainability activities. Since 2017, they're trying to stimulate the consumption of vegetarian and vegan meals. And this is not only related to environmental concerns that emanate from students, by the way, but also concerns related to animal welfare and animal rights. So some of the interviewees have mentioned that most students, and that includes poor students as well, according to them, they are interested in these ethical issues, and therefore the university has been trying to adapt the food offer as an answer. So in the same context, the cruise at Lille has been trying to promote organic and more ecological food options. So I'll show you some examples of communication and information on sustainability. So there are a few campaigns that use sustainability as an argument to promote universities' restaurant offers. Here's an example. You can see it's written, try our quality coffee, organic and fair trade, for example. Another example, it's written, sustainable fishing, let's help preserve our oceans. 65% of all fish we select are eco-certified. So cruise goes further by buying other products issued from responsible food sectors. So this is actually a sustainable development week that is happening this week here in France. And the communication campaigns also appeal to students' individual responsibility. Here, for example, they tell students to bring their own cups from home to reduce waste, save money, and chill. So basically, each vending machine has a detector, and if the person brings a cup from home, the drink will automatically cost 10 cents cheaper. And to finish with the results, with the COVID-19 pandemics, we had to raise new questions related to food and vulnerability on campuses and adapt our research. But first of all, university restaurants, they were closed due to lockdown. So there were difficulties in feeding the most vulnerable students. And university has then assumed this humanitarian work going beyond its original mission, and sometimes the sustainable part was a little bit forgotten. And then Simona will conclude.
So the first results of our research show that in recent years, students' food vulnerability and food sustainability have become main issues for the University of Lille. At the same time, the first on-site observations and interviews with the students highlight the difficulties and the contradiction of these actions. But in conclusion, what is clear is that the measures implemented by the university services have certainly political implications. In fact, they contribute constructing the image of the University of Lille and positioning this institution in relation to other universities in a context where public universities are more and more in competitions. Thank you for your attention.
How do we do this now?
Thank you very much, Simona and Cristina. And now it's time for questions. And I want to start with a small one, because is it the University of Lille really the biggest one in France? So with a number of students.
Yes. Well, it used to be actually several universities, and 2 years ago, more or less, it was united and became one big university. So there are 5 different campuses all around. So yeah, it's almost 70,000 students that the same offices have to deal with. So the same campaigns are going all around these campuses, all around Lille, and even in cities just beside Lille. It's not even Lille itself, so it's quite big.
Okay, so I thought it was something in Paris, as always, but happy to understand that. So it's time for questions to Cristina and Simona. Just go ahead, please.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Because I'm like, thank you very much for sharing your research. It's really, really interesting. I'm myself also researching about university students in China and Brazil, and about vegetarian and vegan university students.
Oh, come on. Let me tell you something. I'm Brazilian and I'm going to do a thesis about exactly that, vegetarian, vegan food at university. So we have to exchange later.
Yeah, we have to exchange that.
Network.
I'm finishing my PhD this year, so we definitely have to to talk about it. And I'm I would like to ask, in the University of Lille, there was any kind of backlash with these vegan and vegetarian projects? Because in the University of São Paulo, the Meatless Monday had a little bit of tension in there, like with the other students that were also like promoting this access to food, and they're like, how come access to food and there's like non-access to food, this restriction of food? So did this happen in the University of Lille as well?
Well, it happens all over France, really, because it's a national campaign. So in every university, every public university in France now offers a vegetarian meal every single day, or they are supposed to. As I have seen, it doesn't really happen every time. There is no clash, really, but there are many critics, let's say. But it's working well because since it comes from the government and it's a national policy, there isn't much they can do, really. I mean, it's decided, and they are even trying here at Lille, they're trying to offer vegan options. So they're going even further. And so far it's going well, especially at the campuses where you have students from social sciences, humanities, that according to CRUS, which is the public body that deals with the restaurants, these students are more interested in these ethical issues. So apparently at least 30% of the dishes they sell, they are vegan at these restaurants in these social sciences campuses. So it appears to be working, but to be honest with you, I'm still starting on the research, so I don't have many details.
Thank you so much.
More questions?
Yeah, I have a question,
yes.
maybe a couple of questions. Is the research, is it like, is one of the goals of the research to kind of like maybe influence the university's decision making, or kind of like as a report for the university? But is there any resistance from the university about like, or any like you mentioned, like the sustainability at some point was kind of lost, for example? Is there any tension in that regard?
Yeah, no, we don't have the intention to, let's say, change things ourselves. Obviously, the results will be published, and if that causes any change, great. And we're also in contact with students, so that may create some awareness with them, but that's not part of our goals. And I don't think there is any resistance. Actually, there are some people who work here that actually really green, let's say, and they are very, they're activists almost. One of them actually that has a important responsibility in some of these issues. She used to work in politics before, so they are very engaged. But what we have seen so far is that sometimes there's a speech and there's the reality. So it's not always, they don't always come together. And there are many contradictions. For example, when you look for the garbage here, you cannot really throw plastic with plastic, etc. I mean, there is no sort of thing. So they have some initiatives, they're really, really impressive, but at the same time, some basic things are not being done yet. So we're still trying to understand if it's really only a speech, if it's only political.
Yeah.
Even though there is an interest, some people are really interested, they're really engaged, but I don't know, sometimes also the whole machine that it's complicated to deal with, because it's a public university and it's so big, and many of the actions actually have to answer to a higher institution, because even the crews that deals with the restaurants, they are local, they have a regional director, but they have to answer to a national institution that's called CNUS. Actually, all these crews are together, and they have this committee that decides everything. So they're not really free to do whatever they want.
Right.
So yeah, it's more or less, I don't know, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of struck me because like the idea that, the university is responsible for education, but then, like in addition, for example, it should be a civil, a civil actor in responsibility. So sustainability is one of those goals, but it seems to me like, in sustainability education, for example, one of the critiques is that, like, we're teaching about sustainability. We're not, living sustainability. It's not built into the already existing thing. So I just wonder, in a program like that, I think there's such a good case or argument to be made that, these sustainable practices are part of the education mission of the university.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe framing, I don't know, it always seems to me that framing sustainability as not something that's taught about, but as part of, as living, as a living education is it could be really effective. I've been studying education the last couple of years, so I've been thinking about this a lot.
Yeah.
But anyway, that thought came up when you're in your presentation. So it's a really, really interesting project. So yeah, nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think some people here actually agree with you, but again, there's the whole machine and it's very complicated. It's a big university. So sometimes they have ideas that could work with small groups, but then when you have to think of the whole university, sometimes it's complicated and it takes sometimes years to be implemented, etc. So that's a problem. They also have more money, so that's the good part. So sometimes some projects actually happen because of that. But I agree with you. I was actually also thinking about the relations between education and maybe a more practical way to do things and actually apply everything that we are studying and teaching. Thank you for your question.
Hi, I have a question. If we still have time, is it okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very short.
Okay, really short. Yeah, like thank you for all your intervention. I like the last part about the coronavirus crisis and how the university was maybe dealing with that and offering a solution for students. And I was wondering, because for instance, in the case like the university I am in France, during the entire quarantine time, they implement like initiative like food boxes and like this kind of concept in order to make sure that even when the university was actually closed, all students still have like something to eat. And I was wondering if it was, because I had the feeling it was more an individual initiative from some people in the university in Tours, but is it like, was it the same thing in Lille, or is it part of like a bigger program? That was my question.
There was a little bit of everything. There were some individual initiatives. We conducted some interviews with people who actually, well, they are professors and they also work for the university. So they created a whole, they went to supermarkets to ask people to give them food, and then they actually made a distribution themselves. But at the same time, I don't remember how much, but the university actually gave money to international organizations like the Red Cross, to give food to students, basically, because many of them couldn't leave the dorms and they don't really have kitchens. And many of the students lost their jobs, so they really couldn't eat. So that's why we said actually the university added a new mission. So it was really humanitarian work. So there were many levels, individual, many students actually helped each other also. I think there were some associations here that also helped some students during this period. But there was a lot of money actually that was spent to give students food, basically, because the restaurants were closed, so they couldn't actually go and eat. They had to really stay closed inside. So it was very complicated. But yeah, there were many different sort of initiatives going on at the same time.
Thank you.
Okay, so just a quick question also, Rebecca. Are you presenting again today?
Well,
or?
I have no idea. Yeah, because I did the presentation today, and I just saw in the program that was again. I was like, okay, wait, not
No,
really.
Mistake, isn't it?
Yeah, like no, it's like it's the same. So I don't know. Like I
remember your presentation yesterday, and it's the same title. So it's
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I don't know. I try I worked in order to change it like a little bit and to add some stuff based on the question also I had yesterday. But yeah, that's the situation right now. So it's as you want. I can do it again. I can
So that's all. Thank you. Sorry about that. And just one question: due to different data protection and other things, you are not allowed to share information directly here in our chat with your colleagues. But anyway, nevertheless, if you want to share some information with your colleagues here in the room, like your emails or something, just tell me, send that information to me, and I will share with the person you want, right? So that's the only thing to say. And after that, it's time to Sonia Hamzaoui from the Institut National du Patrimoine de Tunis, and the title is Mediterranean Culinary Heritage Between Denigrated Tradition and Sustainable Development Perspective, the case of Tunisia. So, Sonia, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yes.
So, Sonia, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to try to share my screen.
Screen, yes.
Yes, I don't know how it works. Is it okay? Can you see my my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you for the invitation, and I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Sonia Mlayah, and I'm a researcher at the National Heritage Institute. I'm also a doctor on sociology and a nutritionist. And today I'm going to speak about the Mediterranean culinary heritage between denigration tradition and sustainable development perspective. And I'm going to take the case of Tunisia. I don't know how it works to change the, why does it?
Just click on.
I click?
Yes.
Ah, okay. No, it doesn't work. Ah, okay. So within an involving social and economic context, the Mediterranean food practices are constantly changing. These changes has generated among the new generation a denigration of their culinary heritage and an attraction for a global diet that allows them to belong to a specific community and a social ascension through the adoption of some kinds of diets like vegan, healthy, flexitarian, organic, etc. So in Tunisia, young people doesn't escape to this new global trend. Indeed, the traditional food model related to the preservation of foods, preparation of them, and their authentic flavor, and the processing of leftovers is an integral part of the Mediterranean diet and a cultural and intangible heritage that is now under threat. But is it really under threat? And why is it under threat? The purpose of our study is to analyze the change between the traditional Tunisian food model and the modern one, underlying the importance of the role played by the first model on sustainable development, to identify the factors of this change, and to show how the driving force for change can no longer be a threat to sustainable development, but rather a powerful ally. So I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to compare the model and the traditional model by studying the purchasing behavior, conservation, preparation, consumption, and behavior in dealing with leftovers. So I start with purchasing behavior. In the traditional model, the agriculture was, the economic was a subsistence economic. So the agriculture was artisanal, and people own have their own properties. So the supply was annual for those people, and the people who are poor or limited, the rich one offer them their annual supply. And there was a limitation of daily purchases to rapid perishable products, and there was a respect of the seasonality. In the modern model, there is no more annual supply, and there is an extension of the range of products purchased from mechanical farming and from intensive farming. There is a use of local and global agro-industrial products. There's an increasing of the buying these products, and people don't respect anymore the season borders. So here you can see a traditional agriculture, artisanal agriculture. And I'm going to take just one example of purchased products. I'm going to take the case of bread, which was never bought. It was prepared at home, and it had an authentic flavor. Whereas now the food is almost never prepared at home, and it's an industrial production, and it has multicultural flavors, because it comes from, it can be Lebanese bread, Viennese bread, Italian bread, and so on. And this is a picture of the traditional Tunisian bread. So even advertisement in the traditional model, it was in the vicinity. So the persons who sells their merchandise were singing about it to attract clients. So it was limited to a little number of persons. But now it is mediatized, and it reaches a large number of people, and people now are familiar with foreign brands. For the conservation in the traditional model, it can be, foods can be conserved by drying, salting, cooking, pre-cooking, and in olive oil. People conserve olive oil, cereals, and some legumes, fruits, meats, fish, and dried octopus. Whereas now there is almost no more annual conservation, and people store their foods in the freezer. And in this case, they appropriate a new kind of new flavors, and denigrate the authentic flavors that comes from traditional conservation, because the children are not initiated to this flavor. The consumption behavior in the traditional model, there was 3 main meals with snacks, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and the one in the morning at 10 a.m. contains leftovers from the day before or fried food, and it can also contain donuts, sorghum, arcida, which is like a porridge of flour. And there was commensality and conviviality, whereas in the modern model, there is two main meals, and there is people prefer nibbling to eat meals, and in the breakfast it contains cereals, coffee, and or milk, and there is food individualism. So people eat just once together. The family eat just once together. The alimentation was abundant in cereals and vegetables. So it was really the Mediterranean diet model. Whereas nowadays, there is a denigration of several preparations from our culinary heritage, those based on cereal products like sisa, sida, bulgur. I'll show you the pictures, perhaps you can recognize some of them. Those based on dried meats like kajit, merguez, those based on vegetables and legumes like vegetable stew. And people even don't dislike, some people dislike food prepared with olive oil, which is, how can I say, which comes from the Mediterranean diet, and it's important in our Mediterranean diet. And this because the women don't cook at home, don't have sufficient time to cook at home. And so this kind of cooking is taxed as archaic. So this is examples of traditional food that is denigrated now by a new. So in the traditional model, eating outside was unworthy of the son of a good family. So dishes, if dishes are bought outside, they are eaten with the family at home. Whereas now, every people eat at home by obligation. They can eat behind the school or at home. And they can eat also because it's an act of prestige and modernity, and they go to restaurants with international and gastronomic cuisine. For the leftovers, in the traditional model, people reuse or proceed to reuse, to eat leftovers, or they can offer the leftovers to hands and pets. Whereas now there is many food wastage, and we can say that 900 loaves of bread are thrown away daily, and it's enormous. You can see the bread thrown. So the traditional Tunisian food model meets the FAO definition of sustainable diets. Diets with low environment impact contribute to food and nutrition security, to a healthy life for present and future generations, and to protecting and respecting biodiversity and ecosystems. They are culturally acceptable, economically equitable and accessible, affordable, nutritionally safe and healthy, and optimize natural and food and human resources. So what are the reasons of this changing? The reasons, everybody knows that reasons is the transition from a subsistence to a market economy, acquisition of new technologies, women's work, urbanization and industrialization, globalization of trade, international transport and media development. All these contribute to the appearance of a new way of drinking and eating, a new culture of eating and drinking, a new taste and new flavors. How can I change? But there is also other factors of change, like in one hand, the emergence of a new food concept, advocating a new philosophy of eating and drinking based on new physiological and medical theories, respect of nature, protection of animals and the environment, etc. Yes, okay, I'm going faster. On the other hand, the development of social networks like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and blogs to show all kinds of recipes and diets. So that will lead to the emergence of new food models of the future, like vegan, healthy, etc. And according to Claude Lévi-Strauss, it is not enough for food to be good to eat, it must also be good to think about. And in the Tunisian model, it was based on emotion, and now it is based on thought. So we have to keep in mind that these new food models are for the most part in line with the vegetarian diet in general, and the Tunisian culinary heritage in particular. It will then be beneficial to adapt our culinary heritage to these new philosophical and dietary trends. And especially on the one hand, culinary heritage is a living and dynamic intangible heritage. On the other hand, there are more and more chefs today who are in the innovation inspired by culinary heritage. So we have to adapt the foundations of the past to the requirement of the present, and to make the driving forces of change a powerful aid for sustainable development. And we can take the examples of India with dabawalas, or all over the world with fast food inspired by traditional cuisine, Uber Eats and concept restaurants. So in conclusion, it is now necessary to protect our culinary heritage as a vector of sustainable diets while encouraging culinary creativity. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sonia. And now it's time for a few questions.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question about how you, like, what's your idea of the word tradition? Because right now, you know, like when you face a culinary tradition and you're talking about that, but what was your conception of this word, and from that, like, how you worked with that? That will be my question.
Traditional food are the food that our grandparents were having. So there is a change from like 100 years ago and now. There's because I make a study between the comparison between the traditional model and the modern model, and I was interviewing people, aged people, having perhaps more than 60 years, and they were speaking about their food, mother food, when they was young in their family, when how can I say, the society was traditional. They were living in the same house, all the family. It was not a nuclear family, it was the whole family living together, sharing all the practices of food together. And this was, and they was living in traditional house, not like now in studios or apartments. No, it was a big house with many space to storage, to do every kind of activities related to food.
Okay, thank you.
There is time for one last question. Well, in this case, I have one short and small one. Sonia, do you think that Tunisia is presently living a nutritional and food transition, and how is, I mean, in globally or more in rural areas, more in urban areas? What do you think about this kind of transition?
I think that the transition is spread all over the country because of Facebook. It's a real factor of change, and Facebook, we can see it all over the country, but it is especially changing in urban areas. And the change is real. We can observe this change even in the kind of thinking of the new generation. So they are really in the adoption of new concepts like vegan and flexitarian and etc. So I'm speaking about the new generation. So the teenagers and the people's like 30 years, they are in that kind of behavior.
Okay, so thank you very much, Sonia.
Thank you.
And now, if you agree, Mariana and Leah, actually is first Leah with her communication, and after that is Mariana with another communication on sustainable diets. I am wrong? So my proposal here is, as Sonia's talked about and sustainable diets also, and Mariana, you are talking also about sustainable diets. May you go first, if Leah agrees, of course, and talk you first, and after you, Leah. Are you both, do you both agree with that?
For me, it's fine.
Leah, please. Leah, do you agree with me?
Sorry, technical difficulties there. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much, Leah. And so, Mariana, the floor is yours right now with sustainable diets, intergenerational challenges from the global south.
Thank you so much. Can you guys see my?
Yes, perfectly.
So Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today. It's such a pleasure to be here discussing with you all. And well, today I'm going to present. My name is Hamzaoui. I am from the University of Campinas, and I'm the fellow here at Freie Universität in Germany. And today I'm going to present to you part of my PhD research on sustainable diets, intergenerational challenges from the global south. So, how is this? Yes. So the act of eating, besides nutrition, is also an act of imagination, because as the previous presentation also presented, like it involves memories and perceptions of social reality, and also people's aspiration for a better future. So the challenge of sustainability nowadays is reshaping the gastronomic practices in this global context. So my research brings the perspectives of global south, especially Brazil and China, on how development in these countries influence nutrition transition and how this built different historical experiences in different generations in these countries. I focus in the last 3 generations, and how nowadays food consumption and now these environmental values are being negotiated intergenerationally, because I believe it is a big challenge for sustainability to engage and reach these social actors to promote change. And I believe it's very important for us to know that these actors have values, have memories, have aspirations as well, depending on the context. So very briefly, my theoretical framework is the Rich Society from Ulrich Beck. So that is the one that we use for climate change right now in sociology, and it promotes this global responsibility and global impact. So something that you do in Brazil has a global impact in the world, so it's very important for us to discuss this together. But oftentimes the Anthropocene is pushing a narrative of this indifferentiated humanity that would be, oh, climate change is caused by humanity, but which humanity are we talking about? Who are we talking about? So the responsibility and vulnerability are distributed unequally from geographical, racial, and class perspectives. And thinking about and researching about climate change in the neoliberal context, it also pushes for this very individual action to tackle climate change. And also it's being built a moral discourse regarding green behavior, especially coming from the global north. So that is why I believe that it's very important for us to think the Anthropocene also from the global south. I believe that these countries are going through economic development and the better life conditions and expansion of consumption, at the same time that we are experiencing increasing socioeconomic inequality and having to deal with the environmental impact. So I think it is very important for us to think about sustainability narratives based on our development experiences. And my 2 case studies are China and Brazil, and I focus on urban consumption. So I focus in Shanghai and Sao Paulo. I know it's a very broad topic, so I decided to choose meat consumption because it is very controversial. So meat consumption has a very big negative impact in the environment, on carbon footprint, water footprint, and the nutrition transition in these 2 countries and the expansion of consumption had a great global impact on these supply and consumption chains. At the same time that I know this is a very big problem, meat also has a very important symbolic value in China and Brazil. So we must understand these consumers as subjects of values, desires, and motivations. Just to illustrate a little bit, I don't know if you're familiar with the increasing of meat in these 2 countries. So the blue one is Brazil and the red one is China. From the 60s to the 2000s, we can see this really big increase of meat consumption. And also a little bit to illustrate the environmental impact of meat consumption, we can see that usually animal products have a much bigger impact in the environment. So I know it's very small, but if anybody wants this data, I'm happy to share. Just let me know. This data is from the World Resource Institute, and you can see this last one is beef, and compared to the other plant-based and food, the impact is just really, really, really much bigger. So why China and Brazil? Well, in China, there are many historical experiences of food deprivation. And I think the most famous one is the Great Famine. And Fei Xiaotong, that is a Chinese sociologist, says that the Chinese culture's dynamism comes from the intergenerational dialogue. So even though this is a memory that was from the previous generation, this is made very present in the present generations through this very close relationship between the different generations. So it's even though it's not something they are going through right now, it is something that is still resonates in their experience when choosing food. And in Brazil, I bring two very important researchers, Alba Zaluar, that talks about the importance of mistura. Mistura is usually the animal protein in the dish, so it's usually chicken or beef. And she says that for many of the people she interviewed, like especially low income, they would say that, oh, it's a meal whenever you have mistura, whenever you have the animal protein. Otherwise, it's kind of a snack or a little salad, a little something, but not really a meal. So the importance of these animal proteins to have to be considered a meal. And also Antonio Cândido, that brings the concept of fome psíquica, this like psychic hunger. I don't know exactly how to translate, but he brings a very interesting perspective because he says he researched about the rural areas in São Paulo, and he says that even though people were not starving because they could plant what they eat, and they could raise like small animals like chicken to eat, they had this hunger that was not nutritious. They were really longing for different foods. Beef was one of them. So he expands this concept of hunger outside of the nutrition's realm, but also going towards what can we consider hunger, what can we consider a hungry person. So in which ways this experience of food deprivation still resonates in food consumption practice in China and Brazilian families today? How these experiences from the previous two generations really impact in the food consumption today? I believe it's very important for us to understand and to research consumption as a matter of social justice, because I think oftentimes changing taste is also kind of mixed with losing access. I think especially in the context of coronavirus, I read some articles, like newspaper articles, that were saying that we had a really good sustainability success because we're reducing meat consumption. So attributing this as a changing taste, people were losing the taste for meat, but actually in the developing countries, this is often losing access. People cannot afford buying meat anymore, especially during economic crisis. So I believe that whenever we discuss about changing taste and changing values, we must think about this as a matter of social justice, because I don't think it's a very big success if people are just losing access without having the possibility of choosing what they want to eat. So I think the main issue is how to empower the social actors to choose, to have this power of choosing what to eat and making them choose for sustainability. I think this is a challenge that we all share in like many countries. So my methodology was mixed methodology. I'm gonna bring just a couple of highlights because I know I'm very short in time. And this survey, Jovens Universitários em Mundo em Transformação. This is a Sino-Brazilian survey and about values. So I'm sorry, this is in Portuguese, but it's like disposition to change the behavior to preserve the environment, both China and Brazil. And the important point here is that we can see, even though we have very different development experiences, we still have some convergences, we still have shared values and the possibility of dialogue between these two very different realities. My qualitative methodology, I did fieldwork in China and in Brazil in 2018 and 19. I did ethnography, participant observation, and semi-structured interviews. And my focus was intergenerational food narratives. I was researching with the university students as well. And it was very interesting because my first approach in the fieldwork was trying to ask them how they perceive food consumption and what they would eat, how they would choose. But there is this naturalization of the value of meat. So people would say, oh, I eat because it's good. Oh, it tastes good. Oh, it's good for the health. But they didn't really, it was very difficult as a researcher to have access of what meat really means to them, because there is this naturalization of the value of the meat. So I decided to go for vegan and vegetarian students and how they discussed this with their families. It was a very interesting fieldwork, but with a lot of tension, because these families, they were fighting a lot about what meat really means and what is the priority when choosing what to eat. Should it be healthy habits? Should it be the heritage, like the culinary heritage? Should it be this new environmental concerns? So this was something that was very, very discussed, and that's why I chose to research this specific community and their families. And some of the conclusions, well, the focus of my thesis is intergenerational narratives regarding food consumption in the global context, and meat as a very global commodity. So one interesting thing that one of the students told me, it was, when I think about meat, I think about the whole world. So meat, having this imaginary of not only having these very global chains, because usually, oftentimes in China, you would eat Argentinian meat or Brazilian meat, and not then having this imagination of something very global, and also the impact in the environment, it's very global as well. So whenever I would ask, oh, about climate change, they would say, yes, it's important for us here to stop eating, because if we stop eating, this is also going to impact positively the climate change in the whole world. But at the same time that this very global conscience emerges, there's this distancing to the rural, which I found it very interesting, because they would tell me, like, on long conversations about how meat was a very global dilemma that we should tackle together. But whenever I would ask them about their perceptions of the rural, they couldn't really understand what this question was about, because meat is about global, it's not about the rural. So this was something very, very interesting. And the importance of historical experience, because the different, like the grandparents and parents and young students, they had very, very different experiences that guided their priorities whenever choosing what they wanted to eat. And the family, like when I started the research, I was trying to ask about individual values, but all my interviews became family family narratives. They, like, whenever I asked them about like how they chose what they ate, they would tell me about their mother, about the father, about the grandparents, and about everybody, and how these choices were very family mediated. And it's very important for us to think, especially in these two countries which are having the populations getting older. So this generation interdependence is going to have influence in the future of politics of care, because in both cultures, in Latin American culture, like Brazilian culture, and also in Chinese culture, it is expected for the kids to take care of the parents. So this kind of tensions happening today are just going to start growing and growing. So I would really like to understand how this is negotiated inside these families. And well, just finally, the Global South historical experience bring different ways to understand and also to respond to demands of sustainability, because these countries are having to deal, as I said in the beginning, with so many processes at the same time, of like economic development, access to consumption, and also this very, very important environmental concern now. And Brazil, besides being a big consumer of meat, is also a great exporter of meat and soy especially to feed porks in China. And they have to deal with this challenge of the sustainability of the chains of production and consumption chains. And I believe this is a great potential for innovation and cooperation with global impacts. So sustainability and the role of gastronomy demand cross-cultural and intergenerational global debate. And I think that rethinking the value, what it means to be a good food, and what it means to have a good life in the development context of Global South, is a way to construct a more inclusive narrative of global sustainable development. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mariana. And now it's time for questions. So, any question?
Yes, I have a question.
Of course.
I First of all, super interesting and well presented project. And well, I have thought about meat consumption a lot. I study how restaurant perceptions of sustainability through storage. And I'm a Mexican doing a study in Sweden. So it's totally different conceptions of reality, I would say. And I have thought about the status of meat consumption that has changed so much. In Mexico, for example, going out to have a big steak that it's 800 grams or whatever one can afford and the best quality. And, you know, the cooks have this, also this proudness of being able to cook this massive, huge piece of meat. And then I come to Sweden, and when I interview the restaurant chefs, even if they will have like meat tasting menus, the first thing that they say is, yes, we know that we serve meat, but we only serve 100 grams each. So it's kind of even a shameful practice to have a restaurant when you have a meat aging fridge, because this is the contradictory narrative, as you say. And I have thought a lot about it, that there's a very predominant narrative from the north that, oh, but you know, countries in development, they are eating so much meat, but they have done it for a long time. So it's very contradicting, and it was very interesting for me to see this proudness against this shamefulness of eating meat, and how the status of this product, for example, in Mexico, eating meat is a status marker. You know, we can afford this kind of product, we can afford this quality of meat, while in Sweden is no, we don't eat meat. We have reduced our meat consumption both in the restaurants and the home to, you know, just one time a week. So it's a very different narrative, and I thought it was very interesting to hear as well your perspective with China and Brazil. So thank you very much. Well, it wasn't maybe not a question but a comment. Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. I think it's very interesting. I also did, like I presented like part of my thesis that is on China and Brazil, but I also did field work in the United States, and it's also very, very different. And being here now in Germany, it's also very, very different, like the perceptions about meat consumption. And I think it adds an extra layer of complexity when we think that this sometimes, like I work with the northern country and the university, and they, at the same time the university was promoting sustainable diets, the Chamber of Commerce was trying to push for exports of meat to China. So it was also very much like the university, but we were there in China saying like, oh, maybe we should rethink food practices. And then the Chamber of Commerce of the same country was like, no, I think you should eat more meat because we are exporting this huge amount of meat to China right now. And because in the country, they were reducing meat consumption. So they were trying to promote it to the developing countries, the people who can afford it right now. And it was in China, it was like something that was so luxurious. You would buy this piece of really big piece of meat. That was something that was not part of the cultural heritage, but this is something that would be a sign of status. So yeah, it's a very interesting. I would love to talk more about with you about it. Like, how do you perceive this? Like this, like in Europe.
I already wrote your email, so don't worry, you will receive my communication.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, more questions, please.
Yeah, I have a question.
So
if I understood it well, you have studied mainly young people in China and Brazil. So in the end, many university students, more or less what I am also studying here. So I wanted to understand if there are differences between, you know, maybe nationalities, or maybe inside one nationality you also happen to find groups, I don't know, which are the reasons they decided to eat less meat? Are they, I mean, I imagine they're not only environmental, they may be also political or related to, I don't know, animal welfare, animal rights. Are there differences in these countries? Maybe in Brazil is more one reason, in China another, I don't know. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, for sure. You're absolutely right. There were many differences, and it also depends on how vegetarianism entered in the mainstream culture. So in Brazil, it was something that it seemed to me that was more historically old. Like we had, like people had been discussing vegetarians for much longer. And in China, it seems to be a much rather like recent phenomenon. Like in China, they had like traditional like Buddhist diets, which were, some of them were vegan or vegetarian. But this new kind of like urban phenomenon, because like I also like to say that like I research about urban consumption. So I bet that depending on the region of Brazil and the region of China that you go, it's going to be completely different. But on my field work, I did these two cities like São Paulo and Shanghai. And in China, it seems to me that like environmental values, because this trend like of vegetarianism came much recent, it had already involved this debate on environmental concerns. So this was more present in their interviews. They would say like, oh, I saw conspiracy. They would say like about books and about documentaries that involved environmental issues. So this was something that was very present in the interviews. And in the Brazilians, even though they would recognize, they would say like, oh, it's also bad for the environment. Most part of they tell me, which is like something that it's also like the title of one of my chapters, that is, vegetarianism is room with many doors, because they say that like the first door is usually like animal welfare or it's environment, but as soon as you enter the room of vegetarianism, you see so many different doors. You see like, oh, but actually it's bad for the environment. Oh, but it's actually so they would say like this vegetarianism is a room with many doors. So the main door that the Chinese students would enter would be environmental values mostly, and some of them were Buddhists, so they would say like, my whole family is Buddhist, so I never ate meat before. So this is different, but most part of them, especially in the urban areas, would be environment. And in Brazil, animal welfare was the main door, I believe. That even though like some people say like, oh, but I believe today that like environmental impact is more important, but the first time that I heard, because this was also something, the questionnaire, what was the first time, like, how did you come? Like who presented to you? Did you read something? Did you watch any documentary? And they would say like, oh, but I heard about animal welfare. And I think it makes sense in Brazil because we are a huge producer of meat. So this is something that is in the news. So we see like this huge debates of like exporting like these cows alive. So this is something that I think we have more contact to. So I hope I answered the question. But let's talk more about it because I'm super interested in research.
Yes, sure. And I have just another question. Did you realize more or less when people decided to change their habits? Because here in France, for example, I have interviewed many young people and older people as well. And I don't know why, but many of them told me 2015, 2016. For some reason. I don't know if in Brazil it's something that happened a little bit later or before, and in China it's even more recent. Do you happen to, I don't know.
Actually, like, this is a very interesting question because they decided to change diet. Most part of them, like, of course there are when they're Buddhist, so they never ate meat, but like most part of my students, they all changed when they moved from home. So when they started the university. So it didn't really matter how old were them or like when, like which year, like, because this was something also that I was interested. Is there maybe a phenomenon, like is there a trend? But actually it was much more related to when they left home, because they like, I was very interested in the intergenerational tension. And they said like, when I moved from home, I could finally choose what I'm going to eat. And even in China, the university students don't cook a lot because they are not allowed to have kitchen inside the dorms. So they also had like the Chinese canteens are really, really big. So they also had many vegetarian dishes. And because like in both China and Brazil, commensality is very important. Like sharing food is very important. They said that it's the first time that they could choose to share their food with vegan friends, vegetarian friends. And when they were eating with their families, this was not really a choice. So even though they could pick and choose, like, oh, I'm not gonna eat the meat, like the family would have a big meal, they would pick and choose and say, oh no, I'm gonna not have this but have that. But this was always a big tension about, I researched about Christmas in Brazil and how people negotiated this kind of tensions, because it's usually a big meat or like a chester, a peru or something like this. So this was definitely something that influenced them, but not much like the ear, but like this very specific rite of passage of like going to university and moving cities out of their parents' place.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'll send you a mail.
Thank you so much.
On that, can I just like ask a question, because I totally agree. I think like the moment we live, like,
Please.
sorry, like super short, but can it be a link as well with like the fact that you need to pay for your own food, and sometimes meat is a little bit more expensive? Like I just thought like that, you know, like.
Actually, this was something that I was like interested when I first started, because I thought like I'm very interested in this dichotomy of losing access and changing taste, because if it's losing access, people could not afford it. It's very different than changing taste. They are being convinced that meat is not really good for the environment. But the students that I interviewed, they didn't really say that like that this economic thing, like the economic part of it was a big motivator. They said that they had interest in, like, most part of them always told me like, oh, when I was young, I had interest, but I never really tried. I thought it was difficult. And like actually moving out was this opportunity to try out a new diet, but not really because they couldn't afford it. Because in Brazil and in China, where I researched, they had big university canteens, and the food was subsidized. So actually it was quite affordable for them to eat. In Brazil, the meal like in the university campus would be like kind of like 50 cents of euro. So the whole meal with meat and with everything. So actually, if they wanted to eat meat, they could do it. In China, it would be around the same price. But this was, sometimes they would actually say that it was more expensive to be vegetarian, because like finding organic and then like exactly knowing what, like the labels also, like whenever I wanted to have something that is, what's the name of this, like industrialized, it was usually more expensive. So whenever I asked them like, is your life more expensive now, or is your life cheaper, because I was interested in this question, and they were like, actually I think it's a little bit more expensive to be vegetarian than actually buying meat. But thank you so much. Yeah, that's definitely like something that I would like to continue researching as well, especially with the economic crisis right now. What is really like changing taste, and what is really like just losing access and not being able to afford it.
Thank you.
Okay, so now it's time for the last communication of this morning, and this Leah, Ashe, with gastronomy, sustainability, productivity, and critique. So please, Leah, the floor is yours. Your 12 minutes are yours.
Okay, let's see here if I can do this. I think I can.
All right, yes.
Yeah. Good, okay. Well, thank you very much, Xavier. Two important notes a priori. First, I've realized just how short 12 minutes is, at least if you measure it in words and ideas and arguments. So I've chopped this paper down to size, and I've added the slides, which I'll run in the background as I speak. I'm drawing here, though, in very abbreviated form on the critical engagements I've tried to make on the food world in two earlier works, and you can find both of those on my academia page. The first is my PhD dissertation, a critical study of the food security and sustainability discourses I saw in New York City and Bogota. And the second is a critical evaluation of the alternative food movement and its discourses. Second, I'm just now beginning a project with Xavier on the relationships between food and violence, and between food and between anthropology and philosophy, which will share some elements of the sorts of critique I propose here. So if you're interested in any way, in method or in content, I'd love to be in touch. So that said, by way of introduction, here we go. In contrast to the majority of works presented at this Congress, mine is not a paper that is substantially empirical. Instead, it's a critical essay about the ideas that we, in our roles as researchers and cooks and eaters and thinkers, and more generally as livers in this particular world more or less take at face value, and about the ways that that taking for granted makes us compliant, complicit participants, co-participants in maintaining a world and a world order that is in all senses economic and social, of course, but also political and epistemic and subjective, unjust, unfree, undignifying, and for most of us, ungood. Anthropology is a great tradition of critical analysis, and even a few corners of radical praxis, which I would say is good. I'd like to suggest now and here that we interested in the anthropology of food should build up that tradition and carve out a few more such corners. So while this paper is mostly a lament, a denunciation of the food world, and an expression of sadness for our complicity in allowing it, maintaining it, maybe it's also an exhortation. I've called it gastronomy, sustainability, development, and critique. There's too much there to really chew on in 12 minutes, but in that framing, I do want to call attention to the ways that too many of us, too much of the time, take these and other big ideas of the moment and of our discipline without challenging and perhaps without even reflecting on the production of those ideas and their contents. Who produced those ideas? Who produced those big ideas? Who governs them? Who gets served by them? And who is made to serve them? The Green Revolution discourse could be cast as a solution-finding exercise to what was captured at the time as basically a productivity problem. This casting hasn't disappeared, of course. Gates and Agra and much of the international development industry still revolve around what I tend to think of under the heading more exclamation, especially when it comes to food and agriculture. Curiously, the sustainability industry more generally often gets cast in similar terms, though I remain stymied in that case as to just how building more stuff resonates with those who hear it as sustainability. In any case, what does seem clear to me is that we have in the research world another productivity problem, a bifold one. The first part I'll say is a convenient, willful neglect to interrogate the concepts we put to work in our framing of problems, our analysis of those problems, and our production of research. In our conclusions and recommendations about solving those problems. In other words, a neglectful, naive, epistemic approach to our production of research. A good example here, I think, is our often facile acceptance of the Sustainable Development Goals, their goodness, and the truth of underdevelopment upon which they're built. The second part of our productivity problem is one of complicity. Since in acritically accepting the foundational ideas that give structure and possibility to an unjust order, the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, we are working to ever reproduce those ideas, that order, and that injustice. My lament over all this pulls from many lines of critical and radical thinkers who, by whatever methods of investigation or reflection or meditation or creativity, manage to see and to say things that refute the epistemic structures and master narratives that constrain the merely analytical thinker, a characterization I think could characterize too many academic researchers, that constrain them into compliance with the dominant discourses of our time and place. To put a name on my method that works here in the anthropology of food, I'll say that it draws especially on traditions of critical discourse analysis. One thing I should do right away then is try to give some idea of what I mean by discourse and by critique. Discourse I mean in a Foucaultian sense to refer to the big orienting ideas that structure and limit and define what it is possible to think, rather than in the everyday sense of exposition or exchange of thoughts and ideas. I love the way Arturo Escobar described it. Discourse is not just words, and words are not just wind, an external whisper. Discourse is not the expression of thought. It is a practice with conditions, rules, and historical transformations. To analyze development as a discourse, and I'd add to analyze gastronomy or sustainability or anything else, is to show that to speak is to do something. Discourse makes cognitively available or not the spaces of our intellection, It produces the ways we're able to think, and it disqualifies others, sets the boundaries on our thinking, circumscribes the possibilities for what can be thought, said, practiced, even imagined. In the food world, discourse is what forms and contains the spaces of possibility in which food and people and the world can exist, relate, and interact. And it specifies the boundaries of what those existences and relations can or could or might look like. To critique or to critically engage discourse is, in short, to refuse to take its propositions at face value, and to locate and challenge the power plays at work in its creation and replication. One of the themes that runs throughout my work in relation to discourse is the corruption or perversion of the good. I don't mean corruption in the sense of, say, taking bribes or hiring your nephew, but rather in a more fundamental sense of spoilage, breakage, overturning of whatever good might have lain in some originary form of the good ideas that we take for granted, ideas like sustainability and development. A spoilage that ends up not just producing the goodness of the good, but controverting it, turning it, in other words, into something bad. Some of those corruptions are so severe that they take on a sort of activated badness, turning bad ideas into bad acts that, since we're talking about food, end up sooner or later landing like punches on the bodies of those who suffer their effects. For example, when livably informal, subsistence scale foodways of diversified small family plots cede way to more agriculturally productive, more economically profitable, and more certifiably sustainable production models, this ends up really hurting the people that those actions purport to help. I like to think of this sort of corruption, this corrupted discourse, in terms of the violence of the good. Now, the worlds of food and development and sustainability are so rich and fertile for the sorts of discursive critique I've suggested, it seems incredible that the critique needs making at all. We might debate about gastronomy's state of corruption. We might debate about gastronomy's state of corruption, but sustainability and development moved over that threshold, let's call it the threshold of the good, years and decades ago. The post-development and anti-development movement hit the nail on the head. What sustainable development sustains and is development. And development is the ideological heritage of colonialism, evangelism, white man's burden, and so on, and the economic and philosophical heritage of growth-fixated capitalism and the grand narrative of scientific progress, is not an end worthy of our pursuit. So as we frame our appeals for research funding in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, and as we frame our research questions in our own minds, and as we ask people in the middle of their living to let us collaborate with them as they go about living their lives and we go about studying our questions, I want to insist that we take nothing for granted and let nothing go without critical engagement, especially not the ideas served up to us like one more sustainable food product by the hand of power and under the label of the good. Just a few slides there. To end, and to return at least somewhat to the sorts of discussions more normal in the idea space that is academic research, I want to leave 3 points in light of the excursus I've just made. The first point is an observation, a description of the situations we find ourselves in. When we, whether we are doing time as researchers or as food makers, as slogan-slinging Facebook news blasters or as straw-rejecting virtue campaigners, whatever roles we might be taking up, when we use heavy words like those that give shape to this meeting, sustainability, development, gastronomy, without acknowledging, perhaps without recognizing, and perhaps refusing to see their heaviness, the contents loaded into them by the powerful hand of their producers and celebrants, we are helping to produce and ever reproduce their contents and the order that those contents sustain. The second point is an injunction. Let's not do that. The third point is a recommendation. Instead of doing that, that is, instead of acritically accepting and replicating the terms on which we engage the questions at hand, in other words, since I've effectively recommended depriving ourselves of the hermeneutic tools that make it possible to think about the ethical questions implied not only in our foodways themselves, but in the way we think about our foodways, well, what I propose is let's get critical. Let's get more than critical. Let's get radical, if not with our praxis, at least with our ideas. If anthropology had a slogan, I think it would be this: it could be otherwise. What if we refused? What if we kept that in mind as we went forward? And as we think about food sustainability and development and gastronomy and so on, let's keep otherwise in mind. What if we refused to accept development, say, as a meritable project, or sustainability as a virtue? What if we refuse to ask how, the technical question, before satisfying ourselves that we've come up with good answers to what and why, and is it good? The potentially critical and ethical questions at hand. I say, let's find out. Let's use anthropology's openness to get critical, radical, and engaged, and to imagine what otherwise might look like when it comes to those three big ideas at play in the anthropology of food here today: gastronomy, development, and sustainability. What might they be otherwise? And that's it for me. Well, that's it for my end. So if anyone has any questions, comments, would like to engage.
I had some problems with my video. Just a second. Okay, finally. So thank you very much, Leah. And now it's time for questions. So
Hi, it's not really a question, it might be more a comment. Thank you for your presentation, Leah. I faced like one difficulty, but when you're talking about so critic and how to think otherwise, and like to really engage with your research, as time to time, some of my colleagues are like, "Oh, Rebecca, you're too engaged. You should like be more neutral." And yeah, and how do you deal with that? Because that's a real problem I'm facing. Yeah, maybe once a month when I talk about my projects and what I would like to do. So how did you deal with that? Because your presentation was really, intense. I loved it. But yeah, I would be like, what's the reaction around you? And maybe all of us were facing that time to time. So yeah, that would be my comments.
That's a major question I think that we face as I suppose as livers in the world and as researchers and as academics. So the academic world is holding us to a standard, I think, of objectivity, that grows from a sort of Cartesian perspective where we sit back and see the world and know the world. Whereas livers in the world, we're living in the world. And I think it would be better, I think it is a radical position in that sense to take a sort of anti-academic stance and say, now I am a liver in the world. I know things by living in the world. I think things with my research, I do things with my research so that it can act in the world, so that it can inform the world. I think, Nancy Shepherd-Hughes had a debate with somebody a few decades ago, and I think it was framed exactly as objectivity against militancy. And Shepherd-Hughes proposed, that we be militant anthropologists. And I think that's right. When we research, we have the possibility to see things and to say things that other people don't have. And I think we should use that. It's not a perspective that's embraced widely, I think, in the academy. And to the extent that it is embraced, it's usually kind of constrained. So go out and engage, but engage on these terms that we'll give you. You know, so the funder give you the money to study something about sustainability goal 7 or whatever it is. And you're sort of employed then to go out in the world and tackle sustainability goal 7. Whereas I think it would be good to I suppose to not take those cues and engage on our own terms. So I don't have an answer as to how to do it, except just do it.
Thank you.
I appreciate your comments a lot.
Maybe I can follow up from that also with a comment and on also your comment, Rebecca. But yeah, thank you for the presentation, Leah. I mean, I couldn't really agree more. And Rebecca, I'm sorry to hear that you deal that's something that you do deal with. But of course, I think it's important to think about how to have those kind of interactions. And maybe I'm feeling really lucky where I am in Helsinki that I'm surrounded by a lot of people who feel this same way. So I don't have, it's actually more sort of empowering to have these interactions with people who would say, oh yeah, but you have to be more neutral or objective. You know, I feel here kind of, well, what I'm trying to say is like having a network of other people in academia is I think really helpful. And then that leads me to, I don't want to say shamelessly, but plugging this conference that is happening in October at University of Helsinki. That is very, it's a big group of this initiative that we're doing in development studies. This department here is, I would say, very, very critical. And it's a project called Exalt Extractivisms and Alternatives. It's not directly related to food, but it is very much has to do with agriculture and food practices and stuff. And maybe if I could send the link here in the chat, and then it can be shared. Anybody can register, and it's free online symposium this October. But it would be a great way maybe also to kind of build this kind of network of furthering critical academia. So yeah, thanks Leah, and thanks Rebecca for the questions.
Yeah, if I could just follow up really quickly. Will, thanks. That was a really great point. I'm glad you made it. Thank you. About the goodness of forming communities of critical thinkers and maybe radical thinkers. And it sounds like you're lucky to be in a place where you can do that. Some people work, say, in maybe a kind of hostile department. I hope that doesn't describe your department, Rebecca, but some people will find themselves in a sort of hostile environment in their own university. Some people will be kind of remote, isolated actors that makes it hard to form those communities. But I think I agree with you that it's really important. And one thing I suppose the current world situation is teaching us is that there are a lot more opportunities to do things online. And I don't necessarily propose that the best relationships can be formed online. I'd like to go sit with my neighbor and have a couple drinks over a good couple hours and figure things out that way about how to change the world. But we can form some sort of community here using these sorts of tools. And maybe we can take this as a cue to make more efforts to form communities in whatever ways we can. For example, online, you have critical food researchers online or something like that. I thought that was an excellent point. Thank you.
I love the idea of forming this community of critical thinkers and critical like food thinkers. So if anybody here starts this community, I am up for it. I would love to join. It's a really good idea.
All right, let's be in touch. There's sounds like 4 of us at least.
Yeah. You know, and yeah, like William, if you can totally like send us the link or like through yeah, like
yeah, I just sent it through to the group chat. Yeah, it would be, you know, it's really exciting initiative, and it's really it's great. So I would love for anybody to come check it out. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Like, thank you so much to talk about it. I think it's always good to look around as well. Like, even if, you know, it's not based on food, it's always good like to have like, yeah, to have a broader look of what's happening in the,
yeah, it's really cool. I mean, I say it's not directly, but some parts of it are directly related to food. And I work in the kind of alternatives initiative, which is, you know, directly related to food. But yeah, it's a really good, broad, conceptual, critical kind of take on what's happening in the world. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, on this topic, let's not forget the work of the critical geographers that you know, work a lot on food, and they were the first on criticize and the fair trade, for instance, for first foods, all this idea of the good and food. But yeah, they have done that for more than 10 years. So let's also, you know, maybe engage a dialogue with these people. So we can do something more interdisciplinary too.
I just forward William's information to all of you, right? The William's link. Okay, so this is the end of this workshop, but to many of us, this is also the end of this Congress. Even if there is an official conclusion at 2 o'clock, but this is our last workshop, the end of this Congress. And as you know, this was the 61st Congress of the International Commission of the Anthropology of Food and Nutrition, and also the fourth international meeting of the UNESCO Chair UOC on food, culture, and development. And it was really a pleasure to be here with you for a couple of days discussing like this. And I just wanna thank you to be there, participating so actively, and to make it possible. So thank you very much to all of you. And of course, see you soon and keep in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Very much.
Nice meeting everyone.
Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Keep in touch. Bye. Bye.
Bye.